Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of June 29th. And I'm really glad to bring on our next guest. It's someone I met back in the day when we were running the Heartland Cafe up here in Rogers Park. He and his family would come for breakfast. We had him on the show way back when. And he at one point invited me to teach a class at DePaul, which I've been doing side by side with Euan Hague for 10 years now. And we talk about organizing from the 60s on with Black Panthers, Young Lords, et cetera, et cetera. And Euan Hague is a wonderful guy with a lot of information. He is the Vincent DePaul Professor of Geography at DePaul University and currently is the director of the School of Public Service. That's a lot for a guy to handle. And I've asked him to come on today to talk about civil rights and history here in Chicago. As you all might have recognized at the top of the show, I talked about 60 years ago, we had 3 civil rights workers killed in Philadelphia, Mississippi. It shook the nation. And here in Chicago, we had a member of the Black Panther Party, a couple members, Chairman Fred Hampton, were also killed many years later. But Euan has just come back from a tour with members of the Black Panther Party, reliving and noting some of the history around the Black Panther Party and civil rights here in Chicago. So with all that said, hello to you, Euan Hague. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Michael. Nice to be on the show.
So last time you were on, we talked about the Neo-Confederacy, a book that you have turned out. But, you're a busy guy. And one of the things that I noticed with my little cell phone was that you were participating in a Black Panther bus tour. Why don't you tell us about what that was all about, what you saw, et cetera?
Yeah, so this was a tour organized on the 22nd of June, so last week, by the Historical Preservation Society of the Illinois Black Panther Party. The tour leader was Layla Wills, and she has been involved in an effort for about the last 4 or 5 years to have sites associated with the Illinois Black Panther Party recognized on the National Register of Historic Places. And that application that the Historical Preservation Society, the Illinois Black Panther Party, submitted was recognized in December of 2023. And so they have been raising money. They are now going to be putting markers on sites around the city and to highlight the work of the Illinois Black Panther Party. And I was fortunate to go on their inaugural bus tour of these sites this past weekend, along with a number of, as well as Ms. Wills, a number of former or current Panthers, including former Congressman Bobby Rush. I spoke with a woman called Lonnie Hall. And so it was an opportunity for about 40, 45 people this past weekend to learn more about the Black Panther Party here in Chicago in particular, although their efforts are statewide. I should just, if people are interested in this project, they should go to ilbpp.org. That is the organization, ilbpp.org. And they have a number of interactive maps on the website, some great archival material, and really interesting to learn more about what the Illinois Black Panther Party was doing, particularly between 1968 and 1974. They were the kind of period highlighted by the tour and by the organization.
So Euan, did you show up some spot and get on a bus? And was it a public bus, a city bus, a rented bus, a Panther bus? The Panthers used to run buses down to prisons. They had a program where they would bring families to visit their loved ones who were incarcerated back in the day.
Yeah, this was a tour organized by the Historic Preservation Society. So it was a bus tour, a private bus. And we started at 1512 South Pulaski, which is a current site of the Better Boys Foundation. And the reason we started there is because back in the late 1960s, it was a boxing gym. And it was one of the first locations where the Illinois Black Panther Party had one of its survival programs, one of the Serve the People programs. It was one of their breakfast programs, led by a friend of both of our, one of the people who was involved in that was a friend of both of ours, Mike, a guy called Billy Brooks, was one of the people who helped set that. He wasn't on the tour; he was not available, but helped set up that breakfast party. So we met there, and then we drove just a couple of blocks to the former site of the Spurgeon Jake Winters People's Health Center, which is at 3850 West 16th Street. Where, as you know, one of the key things around this period in the late 1960s, early 1970s, was a lack of access to healthcare, and a number of organizations, including the Black Panther Party, the Young Lords, groups on the north side, such as your own organization, Rising Up Angry, the Young Patriots, for a short time, put together these people's health clinics. And so we stopped there, learned a little bit about the people's Spurgeon Jake Winters People's Health Center, and across the street at Penn Elementary, which is still standing, was one of the first sites to be testing for sickle cell anemia. And so I think one of the things that really came across from the tour was the efforts of the Black Panther Party to provide community services to residents in this was in North Lawndale.
Yeah, we each year we bring Billy Brooks into our classes, and he talks a lot about what the Panthers did. And you mentioned the health clinics, all those organizations, the Young Lords, the Young Patriots, Rising Up Angry, and the Black Panther Party all had health clinics. The one that was closest to DePaul and was probably I like to say the most advanced was the Fritzie Engelstein Free People's Health Center at Wilton Diversey and the Church of the Holy Covenant. And that was mainly run by Rising Up Angry people back in the day. But you do point out how not only did all these communities lack decent health care and services, but also in the case of the Black community, a lot was the sickle cell anemia, which was really going on. I mean, I don't think many of us had known much about it and how prevalent it was.
Right. Yeah, it was really good. We then moved on from those sites to the site of the former headquarters of the Black Panther Party at 2350 West Madison, which is now a Walgreens. That whole area is completely redeveloped. And then we got off the bus and walked around the block, literally one block away to 2337 West Monroe, where, of course, Fred Hampton was assassinated on the night of the 4th of December, 1969. And it's really interesting to hear the memories of former Congressman Rush and other members of the party. And I actually spoke with Lonnie Hall at that site, and as well as understanding the legacy of the death of the murder of Fred Hampton, but just recognizing the complete transformation, the ability to walk through the neighborhood and just see the complete transformation of it. I think there's probably only one building at that intersection of between Madison and Monroe, the 2300 block, that was there back in the 1960s. Almost everything else is new. And so that's one of the challenges, I think, that the Historical Preservation Society of the Illinois Black Panther Party is facing. As with a lot of these sites where we try to commemorate the past, is a lot of the buildings are gone and a lot of the sites are vacant. And one of the challenges then becomes, how do you preserve a history that's been erased from the physical landscape, not erased from people's memories or from literature, from texts, but certainly from the physical landscape. And then from there we moved on to 201 South Ashland, the People's Church, which is where a number of organizations held events and rallies. It's now the Epiphany Center for the Arts, and it's where Fred Hampton did his last major public speech before his assassination. He did a speech there on the 3rd of December, 1969. And after that was when he was killed in the raid organized by the Cook County State's Attorney.
Yeah, Edward Hanrahan, along with the FBI.
Along with the FBI, yeah. And actually, one of the things I should point out, if people are interested, on Wednesday, the 7th of August at 6 p.m. at the Epiphany Center for the Arts, formerly the People's Church, 201 South Ashland, there's going to be a reception and exhibition of the historic Illinois Black Panther Historic Preservation Society. There's going to be an exhibit. So that's on the Wednesday, the 7th of August.
You know, you talk about the kind of erasing of the physical geography, the buildings. That's actually something that we've observed with our, we take this class called Activists and Activism since 1960, and we take them on a couple of field trips. We go to Uptown. We go to Lincoln Park, where Uptown was where the young Joint Community Union was, and then the Young Patriots. And then the Young Lords were in Lincoln Park. And in both of those neighborhoods, just like you talk about in the neighborhood that got revitalized back a few years back, I think it was 96 when the Democratic Convention, the previous one to the one that's coming up, they did a lot of renovation out there and tore down a lot of things. But in Lincoln Park, the church that we're at the corner of Kenmore and Armitage.
It's 834 West Armitage.
It's now a Walgreens.
Yeah.
And in Uptown, where the Goodfellows were and where there was a lot of action on Wilson Avenue, that's been a lot of renovation is everywhere, apparently. And it's a good thing that we're trying to figure a way to keep people aware of what had gone on in these neighborhoods in the past.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues with historic preservation is historically, historic preservation has been primarily about famous people like presidents or authors disproportionately commemorating white men, and also architecture. And historic preservation has never really been about the activism, community organizing, protests from the bottom up, challenges to authority, and so forth. So there's a whole alternative landscape of historic preservation out there that is ripe for reconsideration. And I think this is one of the great things, like a group like the Historic Preservation Society, the Illinois Black Panther Party. On our own campus at DePaul, a number of faculty and students have been pushing for almost 10 years to get memorial plaques and markers recognizing the role of the Puerto Rican organization, the Young Lords organization, who were very active on the property on and around our campus. It was formerly the McCormick Theological Seminary, but now it's part of our DePaul University School of Music. So we're going to have a ceremony soon to be marking and identifying those locations. But I think one of the things that I put my other hat on at the moment with my professor of geography hat. But one of the things that the internet has given us in the last decade or so is the ability for high quality interactive maps online. And that's another way that people are recognizing and marking these pasts that are so often raised by having these alternative atlases online where you can make a thematic interactive map, just like the Historic Preservation Society of the Illinois Black Panther Party has done, where you can actually find these locations. And I think that's really important, because one of the things that often gets lost in the redevelopment is where places are and how people would have negotiated that urban landscape to raise their voices, to challenge authority, to try to make a change and try to make a difference. One thing that struck me on the tour was just how near the Black Panther free health people's health clinic was to the boxing gym where they did the free breakfast. I mean, I knew the addresses in my head. I could look on a map, but literally just driving around the corner and seeing how close together these locations were, was interesting. And then I think we actually finished over on the south side, over at 4233 South Indiana, which was the second office of the Illinois Black Panther Party. And then we turned the corner around from there, and we stopped at the church where Emmett Till's open casket was, which for a long time stood unmarked, but now is on the National Register of Historic Places. So again, sort of beginning to write this civil rights history into Chicago's landscape. For a long time, there was no recognition of Martin Luther King's residence here in Chicago. Now, in the last 10 years, we've had a statue and sort of commemoration built at Marquette Park. Obviously, the apartment that King lived in at the time on the west side has been demolished, but now there's a new development there. The King condominiums, the King apartments. We drove past it on the tour. But I think for a long time, and this is something, Mike, you'll know from when we teach the students complain that we take them to see empty lots. And that's one of the challenges is how do you impress on the next generation the importance of the work that was done in buildings that are no longer there. And I think, that's an interesting challenge.
Let me jump in and for people who may not know the details of a couple of things, tell people about Emmett Till briefly. And then I also want to go back to DePaul's campus.
Yeah, so Emmett Till, and many people will know, was actually, we learned on the tour that Fred Hampton's mom babysat for Emmett Till, and therefore Fred Hampton and Emmett Till knew each other, albeit Till was a little older than Fred Hampton when they were children. But Till was murdered, I believe, in Mississippi in the mid 1950s. He'd been sent, like so many families of African American descent who moved to Chicago from Mississippi. They came up the Illinois Central Railroad, which in those days terminated Roosevelt and Michigan, and then came from Mississippi and up the railroad into Chicago, and then occupied the South Side. And quite often that children of these migrants would go back to stay with relatives in the summer. And Till was his body. He was alleged to have whistled or made a suggestive remark towards a white woman, and as a teenager, he was found murdered in the Tallahatchie River.
We had his cousin who was in the room when they came and pulled him out, and he was on the Live from the Heartland show. Okay. And I do think we have Katie Hogan, who sometimes comes on and is one of the producers. She has a tape of that.
One of the most famous things, though, was that his mom allowed at his funeral, his mom allowed the visitation of the open casket. And this was widely photographed. And this was in Chicago where we stopped. And this was widely carried in the press, and particularly in the black press, which is, of course, very prevalent here in Chicago as well. And that really kind of really brought the threats and the threats to African Americans and the importance of the civil rights movement into the national spotlight, particularly when the white men who had murdered him were exonerated in a very quick trial with an all-white jury, and then actually, I think, almost bragged about it afterwards. I don't remember the details exactly. So that was it sort of again showed that Till's murder and Fred Hampton's murder are 15 years apart almost, and they're parts of the same efforts to struggle to challenge white supremacy, structural racism, and make a difference in our society through advancing civil rights.
Yeah, we're at a time when we thought, I'm doing some writing on a number of fronts, and one of the things I was doing yesterday was just talking about the hope we had back in the day and how now we have a kind of a rising tide of fascism, not only in this country, but around the world. And I think it's really important that those of us who are, for peace, justice, harmony, et cetera, really get the word out. Let me ask you, Euan Hague, who was on the tour with you on this bus? What sort of people? Academics, neighborhood people, activists, white, black, Latino, et cetera?
Well, first I should correct myself. The Till's body was at the open casket, the Roberts Temple Church of God in Christ at 4021 South State, if anyone's interested in going to see that location. Who was on the bus? Well, there was a number. It was people familiar with the Illinois Black Panther Party, former members of the party, their friends and relatives. There was some other academics there, people from the preservation community. I spoke to one woman who's involved in efforts to preserve historic sites in Oak Park. And so there's sort of a general effort to raise awareness of sites associated with the Illinois Black Panther Party. So it was a group of people who I think have been probably following this process at ilbpp.org. And we're interested to take this inaugural bus tour. I believe there's plans for future tours. So I think if you look online, you'll be able to find out more about them.
Well, Euan, I really want to thank you for coming on and talking about this. I would have liked to have gone on the tour, but I didn't sign up, and I think I was in El Paso, so it wouldn't have worked. It's a good thing, and I'm glad you did it. And I'm always grateful for your information and your accounting of events. And when you make a quick mistake, you're right there correcting it on addresses, etc.